Killing Floor 3 released a little over a month ago at this point, and so far the reception has been not good. It was supposed to be the next big chapter in a franchise built upon chaotic co-op survival and addictive gunplay. On paper, the keys to success were already there. Years of fan feedback, a modern engine, and a strong legacy to build upon. In reality, however, the game trips at the first hurdle, staggers back to its feet just long enough to remind you why this series was loved in the first place, and then barrels headfirst through every remaining hurdle like it stopped trying to win the race entirely. Encumbered by technical instabilities and design choices that feel rushed and unfinished, what should have been a meaningful evolution instead feels like the hordes of Zeds themselves, mutated, lifeless versions of what they once were. This, unfortunately, is Killing Floor 3. Let's start with the technical problems, because that's one of the first things you're going to notice. Killing Floor 3's performance is wildly inconsistent, regardless of your settings. Some areas will happily push silky smooth triple-digit FPS, only for the next room to nosedive into the 30s, sometimes even the high 20s, with no clear reason as to why. Unreal Engine 5's fancy lighting system, Lumen, certainly doesn't help. It's clearly the intended look of the game, most of the promo shots you've seen use it, but enabling it tanks frame rates across the board. Disabling it improves things slightly, but even then, frequent frame drops still persist. Whether you go all in on visuals or strip them back for performance, the result is the same. Firefights that feel smooth 1 second, and like a slideshow the next. And, just to rub salt in the wound, multiplayer stability isn't any better. Disconnects are frequent, with Hydra Error 5 being the absolute worst offender. It only seems to happen during the boss round, wiping out all of your progress right at the finish line. The problems run deeper than performance. One of the most baffling changes, for example, is the class system. Previous games gave you flexible perk trees, letting you adapt on the fly and switch roles as the situation demanded with characters of your choosing. In Killing Floor 3, that freedom is gone. Each perk tree is tied to a specific hero with a unique ultimate ability, and once the match begins, you're locked to that character. The perk trees themselves do actually offer meaningful choices. Higher levels unlock skills that can genuinely change how a character plays. The marksman, for example, can lean into long-range precision or pivot toward mobility-based buffs, and both paths feel distinct. The problem is that whatever variety these trees provide gets smothered under the rigid hero system, which feels less like it was designed for gameplay and more like it was designed for monetization. It's not difficult to see why they went down this route, chasing the ghost of games like Overwatch and Valorant, hero shooters that peaked years ago. This feels less like a creative decision and more like a corporate mandate. It mimics recent trends within the industry and forces rigid identities onto players because that structure makes it easier to sell skins later. Why spend time creating universal skins that have to be rigged to each hero's model individually, when you can crank out a single skin for one character and charge the same price? Even more maddening is the fact that the developers have already admitted this hero-based class system doesn't work, promising to rework it in the Year 1 roadmap. Which raises the obvious question, if they knew it was flawed, why launch with it in the first place? This game was delayed once already, so the opportunity to fix it was there, they just didn't. Instead, we wound up with more ways to spend money on the game. And the monetization here is relentless. Killing Floor 3 launches with a battle pass split into free and premium tracks. The premium tier costs 1,000 of the game's premium currency, which you can earn by completing the free track, but that means grinding through the entire pass just to afford the next one, unless you cave and buy the currency outright. That same premium currency is also the only way to purchase time-limited cosmetics in the store. On top of that, there's a deluxe edition DLC that bundles the premium pass with a handful of exclusive items, and another DLC that lets you pre-purchase the next 3 battle passes, none of which have been revealed yet. So while the base battle pass doesn't strictly force you to open your wallet, everything around it, from the store to the DLC bundles, pushes hard in that direction. That's 4 separate layers of monetization baked in on day 1. And since Tripwire Interactive haven't clarified what future content will be free or paid, there's every chance they'll push it even further. This lack of foresight bleeds into other areas as well, particularly when it comes to basic information. The game introduces multiple damage types: heat, cold, electricity, stun, stumble, knockdown. Yet the in-game codex, which should explain these systems, says virtually nothing. Unless you stumble across a skill in a perk tree that references one, you'll be left guessing what they actually do. Most of the stats are vague bars that tell you next to nothing. Reload speed, rate of fire, accuracy, all guesswork. Primary damage at least shows a number, but even that's useless when enemy health pools aren't disclosed. These aren't cherry-picked outliers either. They're just 2 examples of a much larger problem. Without context, the information doesn't guide you, it just wastes your time. It's about as helpful as asking a flesh pound to explain quantum mechanics. For a system that could have added real depth to combat, it's yet another case of good intentions kneecapped by poor execution. The one system that shows promise is weapon modding. Attachments can alter how a gun behaves, like swapping damage types or allowing bullets to penetrate through multiple Zs. In theory, this adds variety and ownership to your loadout. In practice, vague stats as mentioned previously and unbalanced options ruin it. Why pick a compensator that only reduces recoil when another option improves accuracy, reduces recoil, and adds a bonus on top? Sure, the values scale differently with rarity, but some attachments are so obviously superior that the illusion of choice collapses. That same story plays out with the bosses. This game launches with 3 of them, the most of any game in the series upon release. Unfortunately, all 3 fall into the same big angry monster mold, with none of the personality that made characters like the Patriarch so iconic. The Patriarch would taunt you mid-fight, mocking you as he unleashed a hail of bullets with his minigun. These new bosses? They don't say anything at all. They're just big, loud bullet sponges. Even worse, every fight boils down to the same routine. The boss sprints straight at your face, chains basic swipes with a ground pound, occasionally chucks a projectile, and sometimes lunges. Their only real unique tricks are just ways to disengage. The Hive Queen burrows, the Chimera teleports, and the Impaler tosses smoke grenades. Different animations, same effect. Instead of being memorable set pieces, these bosses feel like lazy reskins, 3 slightly different coats of paint slapped onto the same cardboard cutout. The most frustrating part of all of this is, once you're actually in the thick of it, pulling the trigger still feels incredible. The gunplay is tight, the weapons punch hard, and tearing Zeds apart is as gruesome and satisfying as ever. The new gore system cranks that satisfaction up to 11. Limbs, jaws, and rib cages burst apart in grotesque detail that never stops being entertaining. Enemy redesigns are equally impressive. The models are incredibly detailed, the animations fluid, and the overall artistic fidelity is leagues ahead of anything the series has done before. For those fleeting moments, killing Floor 3 reminds you why this series was beloved in the first place. And then, the cracks start to show. Hit detection is laughably inconsistent. You'll often take damage from swipes that clearly missed, even in single player where latency isn't a factor. Enemy spawns are downright awful too. Zeds constantly materialize in your blind spots, often right behind you, leading to cheap hits that feel less like survival horror and more like the game is just cheating. That frustration is compounded by the audio design, which is a complete mess. Enemies approaching from behind often make no sound at all, leaving you blindsided over and over. Special Zeds and mini-bosses do have unique audio cues and even map-wide spawn alerts, but the sound engine fails so badly that you rarely know where those cues are coming from. And since there are no audio settings whatsoever, no surround sound toggle, no headphone mix, nothing, you're stuck with a one-size-fits-none mix that delivers none of the spatial awareness a game like this desperately needs. Map design doesn't help either. Verticality is pointless since Zeds climb everything, choke points are meaningless because spawns just appear behind you, and holding ground is punished instead of rewarded. Even tougher Zeds suffer from the same sloppy spawn logic. The Husk, for example, always drops in from the exact same spots. Once you notice the pattern, any sense of tension just evaporates. What should feel like a dangerous escalation instead turns into boring routine. And that's the core problem with the AI in general. It hasn't evolved since Killing Floor 1. Most Zeds just march directly towards you, with only the occasional ranged attack forcing any adaptation. Cheap spawns are clearly a substitute for genuine variety. Imagine enemies that actually flanked you, or deliberately snuck around to cut you off from your allies. The threat would feel earned. Instead, Killing Floor 3 takes the lazy way out. The difference between, "oh, the game spawned something behind me," and "oh, I should have seen that coming," is massive, both in fairness and in player satisfaction. That lack of evolution bleeds into replayability too. The game at least tries to shake things up with weekly mutations that add rules like disabling all weapon mods or flooding the map with extra flesh pounds. These scenarios are genuinely fun, and you'll occasionally get a taste of them in regular matches through special waves. But outside of that, every run plays out as the exact same 5-wave structure. Previous games at least scaled wave count with difficulty, which made harder matches feel tenser and more rewarding. This time around, everything feels shorter and far less satisfying. Long-term fans of the franchise know that Killing Floor has always been about over-the-top, gore-soaked, adrenaline-pumping co-op action. Killing Floor 3 does deliver those elements, but they're buried beneath a mountain of performance issues, baffling design decisions, and an aggressive monetization system that leaves the whole package feeling like it was rushed out the door at best, or driven by corporate greed at worst. This is not the next chapter in Killing Floor history. Yet. Tripwire Interactive have demonstrated that they're listening to the player base by actively responding to feedback, promising fixes and system overhauls. If they can address the glaring issues, then there is a chance that this could eventually become the sequel we deserve. Regaining the community's trust will take time, but the potential is there. As of right now, it remains a messy, frustrating, but often thrilling experience with flashes of the franchise's old excellence. A cautionary tale with a glimmer of hope. As always, thank you ever so much for listening to me waffle on about video games. See you next time.